My name is Aurora Blake. I am 29 years old and a real estate agent. People always say my life must be easy because I inherited a $1 million house from my grandmother, Margaret Hayes. But they don't know the truth behind that house. It was not a blessing. It became the stage for the most devastating betrayal I have ever faced. I thought my parents, Robert and Martha Hart, would be proud of the woman I had become: independent, hardworking, and ultimately successful. Instead, they saw me as nothing more than an investment to be drained. I never expected to hear my father call me a burden as they traveled to Europe with my money, planning to buy the only house I had ever felt was mine. Something inside me broke that day, and something stronger took its place. I was born into a house that smelled like stale coffee and hopelessness. My father carried his failures like a disease, infecting every room with silent anger and occasional explosions that left invisible burns on my skin. My mother clipped coupons like prayers and reminded me daily of my cost. College isn't for kids like you. That's debt you'll never crawl out of. But Fridays saved me. Fridays meant my grandmother. Margaret Hayes lived 15 miles away in a world of wraparound porches, lavender gardens, and windows glowing gold at dusk. Aurora, my brightest star, she'd say, kissing my hair. With her, I wasn't an expense. I was her purpose. She told me stories of building her business when banks wouldn't lend to women. Never let anyone decide your worth, she'd say, tapping my chest. In her kitchen, drinking tea from porcelain cups I wasn't allowed to touch at home, I felt something bright and dangerous flicker inside me: hope. When I told my parents I wanted college, my father laughed. College is for people who think they're better than everyone else. Don't be stupid. That weekend sitting under Grandma's magnolia tree, I told her, she just squeezed my hand. We'll get you there. Let me worry about him. At 18, she drove me to campuses, helped with scholarship forms, read my essays late into the night. My parents refused to pay a cent. So I worked 3 jobs, living on caffeine and stubbornness. Every weekend she called, "I'm proud of you, Aurora. You are becoming exactly who you were meant to be." At graduation, she clapped until her hands turned red. My parents left before I tossed my cap, but Grandma hugged me tight. "You did this. Don't ever forget that." 4 years later, she was gone. Heart attack instant. I screamed until my throat tore raw. The only person who saw me as anything more than a burden was gone. Until the will reading. She left her house to me, not my parents. To my granddaughter, Aurora Blake, who has shown the determination to appreciate its value. For the first time, I tasted power. It tasted like swallowed tears and stubborn dreams, like the rich, loamy earth of her garden, like freedom. My parents left that day with a small cash inheritance gone by week's end, on a new car and TV. Meanwhile, I moved into the lavender-scented house of promises kept and whispered, "I'll protect it, Grandma. I promise." I didn't realize then I wasn't just promising her, I was promising myself. Because this house wasn't just brick and wood, it was proof. Proof that I was never just a burden. Not yet, at least. Because soon they would try to take that from me, too. The first week living in Margaret Hayes' house felt like breathing clean air after years underground. I woke to soft morning light slanting through linen curtains. I brewed coffee in her old French press, letting its bitter warmth settle my chest. I sat on her porch swing, feeling the wood groan under me, listening to mockingbirds sing secrets to each other. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But my parents, they didn't see it that way. At first, it was small things. Comments slipped into conversations like poison into tea. "This old place needs a lot of work," Martha Hart said, running her hand along the freshly painted banister I'd paid to restore. "You really should let your father handle the finances for it. You don't want to make mistakes." My father Robert sat in Margaret's old recliner like a king surveying his kingdom. When we renovate the kitchen, we'll knock out that wall, he said casually one evening while flipping through channels on my TV. When we renovate, not if, not you, always we. They stopped calling it my house after the first month. It's the family home now, Martha declared at dinner one Sunday, rearranging the silverware I had set out. Your grandmother would have wanted us all here together. Together. Like a chain around my neck. When I suggested boundaries that they call before dropping by, that they not rearrange furniture without asking that they contribute to the grocery bills, they scoffed. Family doesn't have boundaries. Aurora Robert snapped his lip, curling with disgust. What's ours is yours. What's yours is ours. But somehow it only flowed in one direction. Then came the Europe announcement. I was chopping onions at the kitchen counter, lost in thoughts of upcoming listings, when Martha breezed in with her phone in hand. We're finally doing it, she said. 3 months in Europe, Italy, France, Spain. Your father deserves to see the world before he dies bitter and alone. I waited for her to explain how they'd pay for it. I waited as she scrolled through Airbnbs in Paris, as she listed vineyards in Tuscany, as she mused about flamenco shows in Seville. Finally, Robert walked in and said it like it was nothing. We'll use the equity in the house. The knife slipped in my hand, slicing onion skin thin, but I didn't feel it. You mean my house? I said quietly, turning to face them. Robert's eyes narrowed with impatience. Don't be selfish. It's the family home. Your grandmother would want us to enjoy it. Martha gave me her sweet venom smile. Don't you want your parents to be happy? You can refinance. Just sign the paperwork, Aurora. It's not like you're using the equity for anything important. My heart thudded against my ribs. I refused. I said no. But no was never a language they learned to hear. They whined, they guilted, they argued. Eventually, I offered to help pay for part of the trip, thinking it would ease their disappointment. A week later, my bank account drained almost entirely. Flights, hotels, tour packages. Their voices dripped with annoyance from across the ocean when I dared to call. This hotel isn't as close to the Eiffel Tower as you said it would be, Martha complained. Do you want us walking blocks in the heat at our age? They sent me photos of croissants, of wine glasses clinking under Parisian lights, of gondolas slicing through Venetian canals. But never once a thank you. And then came the day everything fractured. It was a Tuesday. June heat pressed against the windows, thick and suffocating. I needed warranty information for the faucet Robert had installed last year, so I called his international number. He answered with his usual sigh of inconvenience. It's in the filing cabinet. Second drawer under kitchen, he said. Why can't this wait till we're back? We're about to have dinner near the Eiffel Tower. I tried to keep my voice calm. Because water is leaking into the cabinet and damaging it. I just need to call the company before warranty expires. Fine, fine, he muttered. Enjoy dinner, I said quietly before he put the phone down. But he didn't hang up properly. I heard rustling, footsteps, then his voice muffled but clear. Who was that, Martha asked. Just Aurora, complaining about something in the house again. Robert replied, his voice bored, dismissive. What now? She said sharply. Something about the faucet. God, all she does is find problems with that house. Silence. Then Martha's voice dripping with contempt. I'd never heard so naked before. I don't understand why your mother left her that house in the first place. It should have gone to us. We're her parents. Robert chuckled low and mean. Once we're back, we need to have a serious conversation about our retirement. Aurora needs to understand that house is our security for the future. I stood frozen, the phone trembling against my ear, hearing my heart pound like gunfire. She's been a burden from the start, Robert continued, his voice hard. All those years of expenses, college, everything. Now she has this valuable property just dropped in her lap, and what she thinks she deserves it. What has she ever done, burden? The word lodged itself in my chest like a serrated blade. She's always been selfish, Martha agreed, but she's easily manipulated. Look how quickly she paid for this trip. All I had to do was say family obligation a few times. They laughed then, the same laugh they shared when mocking neighbors behind their backs. But this time, it was me. I should have ended the call. I should have thrown the phone across the room, but I couldn't move. We just need to keep working on her, Robert said. Eventually, she'll sign the house over to us. Her weakness is she still wants our approval. And if she doesn't, Martha asked, we start talking about nursing homes and medical expenses. Trust me, by next year, that house will be in our names. And if worst comes to worst, we're living there anyway. Possession is 9/10 of the law. She'd never evict her own parents. They laughed again, cruel, confident. I pressed record on my other phone, capturing every vile syllable as the conversation drifted to dinner reservations and the wine list. When the call finally ended, silence pressed down on me like a drowning ocean. I sank to the kitchen floor, knees against my chest, tears spilling hot and silent down my cheeks. In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. Something inside me woke up, and it whispered, if I'm just a burden, then let them see what a burden can do. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, the only light coming from the lamp Margaret Hayes once kept beside her reading chair. The shadows stretched across the polished floors like black scars. My tears had dried hours earlier, leaving my eyes raw, but I felt nothing. Just a cold, quiet clarity pulsing through me. Betrayal. The word wasn't enough to hold what I felt. This wasn't just betrayal. It was annihilation. They had looked at everything I'd built, everything my grandmother had trusted me with, and saw it only as their future retirement plan. And me, I wasn't their daughter. I was a tool, a living bank account, an obstacle to be manipulated, guilted, erased. I replayed the recording again at dawn. Every word sharpened my resolve. She's been a burden from the start. She's easily manipulated. By next year, that house will be in our names. By next year. They had already decided my fate before I even knew I was on trial. As sunlight crept into the kitchen, illuminating the spot where my grandmother and I used to knead bread on Sunday mornings, I made my decision. They would never step foot in this house again. My first call was to Patricia Winters, the only family attorney I trusted. Her voice was brisk but gentle as I explained everything: the call, the threats, their assumption of ownership. Legally, Aurora, they have no claim, she said firmly. The house is yours. You owe them nothing. But document everything. Every word, every text, every voicemail. My next call was to Marcus Wilson, my colleague at the firm, and one of the most ruthless realtors I knew. I need to sell my house. I told him, my voice steady, quietly, fast, no open houses, no listings. Discretion is everything. He whistled low. Family trouble. Something like that, I replied. We met for coffee that afternoon, him in his tailored navy suit, me in yesterday's wrinkled blouse, hair tied back in a tight knot. I laid out my plan with military precision. I'll need a short-term rental out of the city, movers for my belongings, a storage unit for theirs, new bank accounts, new phone, new email. This ends clean. Marcus leaned back, eyes narrowed with a mixture of concern and admiration. You've thought this through. I don't have the luxury of emotion anymore, I said. Not with them. That night, as I packed my belongings into labeled boxes, I moved like a ghost. I sorted everything with ruthless honesty. If it wasn't mine by clear proof, receipts, inherited documents, it went into their pile. No legal gray areas, no room for their claims. At 3 a.m. exhausted, I found myself standing in front of Margaret's old vanity mirror. For the first time, I didn't see the desperate daughter searching for scraps of approval. I saw something sharper, colder, unbreakable. I whispered to my reflection, "You want to see what a burden can do? Watch me." The next morning, I filed for a private sale. Marcus arranged showings within days, 2 buyers, 2 offers. I accepted the hire without hesitation. By the time Robert and Martha finished sipping cappuccinos under the Eiffel Tower, my life had already begun shifting beneath their feet. I boxed up family photos. In one, I sat on Robert's shoulders at a fair, cotton candy in my hand, my child eyes shining with adoration. For a flicker of a second, my chest ached, but then I remembered his voice. "She's been a burden from the start." I placed the photo in their storage box. When the closing date arrived, I wore Margaret's pearl earrings. As I signed each document, the pen glided with silent power, severing ties, securing freedom. Afterward, in the empty echo of my grandmother's kitchen, I left a note on the granite counter where Martha used to criticize my choice of decor. Surprise! A burden did this. Then I walked out, locked the door behind me, and slipped the keys through the mail slot. I didn't look back, because this was the day Aurora Blake died, and someone far more dangerous was born in her place. The day after I vanished felt like floating in the dark ocean at midnight, silent, endless, and cold. My new apartment was a box in the sky, 4 white walls staring back with sterile emptiness. There was no scent of rosemary from Margaret's garden here, no echo of laughter under stained glass windows. Just me breathing, and that meant I was finally safe. I spent the first hours pacing the narrow balcony, phone clutched tight. The silence felt dangerous, like waiting for an earthquake that had already cracked the earth beneath your feet. Each hour passed heavy as lead. Then at dawn, it began. My old phone lit up with missed calls. 1, 3, 10. Voicemails flooded in. First, Martha's sugar slick voice. "Aurora, sweetie, there seems to be a problem with the house key. We just got home from the airport. Call us, okay?" Then Robert, hard and flat. "Where the hell are you? Why is the house empty? This isn't funny." Then sharper, cutting like broken glass. "You think this is a game, you ungrateful little bitch? After everything we did for you." I sat on the floor, back against the balcony door, knees to my chest, listening to every venomous syllable. Not crying, not flinching, just listening. Because every insult was confirmation my decision was right. I forwarded each voicemail to Patricia, my lawyer. Her reply came swiftly. "They have no claim. They have no power. Let them scream into the void." By noon, Robert's rage curdled into threat. "This is our house. You hear me? Ours. You think you can just take it away? Watch yourself, Aurora. You've made an enemy." And Martha still performing maternal concern, "Sweetie, please. We're worried about you. This isn't you. Call us. Let's fix this as a family." I almost laughed. Fix this as a family. The family that called me a burden, that plotted my erasure like it was an afternoon chore. I spent the next few days cleaning every trace of them from my mind. I closed old bank accounts, ordered a new phone, blocked their numbers. Every severed tie felt like peeling off dead skin to reveal raw flesh that would someday heal. On the 4th day, my boss called. "They came to the office," she said quietly. "Caused a scene, claimed you stole their house. We escorted them out. Are you okay?" For a moment, tears burned hot behind my eyes. Am I okay? No one had asked me that without hidden conditions in years. "I will be," I said, and I meant it. But that night, insomnia coiled around my throat again. I lay awake, staring at the apartment ceiling, replaying the memory of Margaret's house bathed in golden dawn, of my grandmother's cracked hands pressing seeds into the earth. "Grow strong, Aurora, no matter what storms come. On the fifth morning, an unknown number flashed across my phone. I answered without thinking. Silence. Then Robert's voice tight with fury. We need to meet. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. Maple Street Cafe. I didn't respond. If you don't come, he continued, his tone dipping into threat, we're going to your workplace again. And we won't leave until we ruin you. He hung up. I sat there staring out the glass balcony door at the rising sun slicing through rain clouds. My reflection looked back at me. Hollow-eyed hair unbrushed, wearing Margaret's old cashmere cardigan like armor. But under the exhaustion, there was steel. Cold, bright steel. They still thought I was the same girl who would cave to their threats. They didn't see what I saw in the mirror now, a woman who had nothing left to lose and therefore everything to gain. I made tea in silence that morning. Black, bitter, no sugar. The way Margaret drank it. As I poured the steaming water into her old porcelain mug, my hands didn't tremble. Let them come. Let them see what their burden had become. Let them realize that when the quiet girl disappears, she doesn't come back weaker. She returns as the storm they never saw coming. That day I called Patricia. They want to meet, I told her. You don't have to, she said. You owe them nothing. I know, I replied, watching rain streak down the balcony glass like tears that couldn't touch me. But I want to. I want them to see what they created. She was silent for a beat, then record everything. And Aurora, don't let them find your wound. They'll dig their claws in if they do. I don't have wounds anymore, I said softly. Just scars. That night, I packed my old life into 2 mental boxes, before and after. Before, Aurora Blake, obedient daughter, silent achiever, invisible savior. After, Aurora Blake, architect of her own fate, mistress of vengeance, wrapped in silk calm. I slept without dreams for the first time in months. Because tomorrow I would meet the storm, and they would learn the girl they called Burden was the same girl who would burn their kingdom to ash. The Maple Street Cafe smelled of burnt espresso and disappointment. I arrived at 10:15, deliberately late. Power moves are often silent. I wore Margaret's pearl earrings, her soft cashmere sweater layered under my black tailored coat. My hair was pulled back in a clean, sharp bun. No makeup except dark red lipstick war paint for a quiet battlefield. They were already there. Robert hunched over his cold coffee, his jaw twitching. Martha sat beside him, eyes red-rimmed, clutching a tissue with trembling fingers. They looked smaller somehow, diminished in the dim cafe light. I paused, absorbing the moment, then walked toward them with silent, deliberate steps. I didn't sit immediately. I placed my phone on the table, recording app open and visible. Robert scowled. "What's this?" he barked. "A record," I said evenly, for clarity. I sat down, folding my hands on the table. Silence pulsed between us like a living thing. "You've made quite the mess, Aurora," Robert sneered, "selling our house behind our backs, stealing everything your mother and I built." My voice was calm, almost gentle. "What exactly did you build, Aubert, the house? Grandma Margaret bought, the mortgage I paid, the kitchen I renovated? Tell me, what did you build besides debts and demands?" Martha let out a quiet sob. "Aurora, please. We're your parents. We raised you. How could you do this to us? How could I?" I repeated, tasting each word like poison. "I listened to you call me a burden. I heard you plan to steal my home, my safety, my life's foundation. I heard every syllable. And still you ask, how could I?" Robert slammed his palm on the table, rattling cups. "You think this is over? You think you've won? You've humiliated us? You've ruined our retirement. We will sue you for everything." I tilted my head, studying him. The veins in his neck pulsed with rage, the same veins that bulged when he yelled at Martha for forgetting to buy milk, the same veins that pulsed when he sneered at me for getting an A instead of an A. "You can try," I said softly, "but you'll lose. Legally, financially, morally. You'll lose everything except the truth. And that, Robert, is what will haunt you. Martha reached out across the table with shaking fingers. Please, Aurora, we're your family. I looked at her, really looked at her. The faded pink lipstick, the trembling chin, the desperate eyes. And for a flicker of a second, pity threatened to break my resolve. But then I remembered her voice in that call. She's always been easily manipulated. I pushed her hand away gently. I am not your burden anymore, I whispered. I am not your retirement plan. I am not your hostage. I am Aurora Blake. And today, this ends. Robert's face contorted into something monstrous. Ungrateful bitch, he spat. You'll regret this when you're alone, when no one wants you, when you're old and worthless. I stood up calmly, picking up my phone. That day may come, I said, my voice low and final. But it won't come today, and it won't come from you. As I walked away, the sun broke through the cafe window, catching on Margaret's pearls at my throat. Outside, the winter wind bit at my cheeks, sharp and invigorating. Behind me, I heard Martha's quiet sob. I heard Robert cursing under his breath. But their voices felt faint now, like echoes trapped behind glass. I stepped into the street, lifted my chin to the cold sky, and breathed in the icy air. Because today, Aurora Blake did not shatter. Today, she rose. The days after the confrontation felt like waking up in a city after a hurricane. The buildings still stood, but everything had shifted. The air tasted different. Lighter, sharper, mine. I spent the first morning sitting by my apartment window watching pale winter sunlight creep across sterile white walls. Steam curled from my coffee mug. My reflection in the glass looked calmer than I'd ever been. No trembling lips, no hunted eyes. Just a woman staring into the world with unblinking certainty. I thought of Robert's final words. You'll regret this when you're old and worthless. Maybe I would. Maybe there would come a day when my hands trembled with age and there was no one left to hold them steady. But that fear no longer held power over me. Because there are fates worse than loneliness, like living your whole life caged in someone else's expectations, like handing over your freedom day after day until nothing remains but silent resentment and the echo of a lost self. I would rather die alone in a studio apartment filled with dusty books and quiet dignity than live one more day as their obedient daughter. That week I met Marcus at a rooftop bar overlooking the city skyline. Lights glittered below us like scattered diamonds. He raised his glass of bourbon. To the woman who vanished and returned with fire in her veins. I smiled faintly, swirling my wine. To rebirth, I replied. He studied me for a moment, the amber bar light catching on his dark eyes. What now, Aurora? You've burned down their empire. What do you build next? I tilted my head, considering the question. The cold wind whipped my hair around my face, but I felt only clarity. I build something they can't touch, I said softly. A life that isn't reaction, but creation. One where my worth isn't defined by what I give or endure, but by what I choose. His smile turned wistful. That sounds powerful. It is. I drained the last of my wine and set the glass down firmly. And it's overdue. When I returned to my apartment that night, the empty rooms no longer felt lonely. They felt clean, untainted, mine. I lit a single candle by the window and opened my old leather journal, the one Margaret had given me on my 16th birthday, with the inscription, "Write the truth of yourself, even if no one ever reads it, especially then." I wrote for hours about the little girl planting rosemary in a sunlit garden, about the young woman working 2 jobs to keep her scholarship, about the burden turned storm the daughter turned architect of her own deliverance. I ended with a single line. This is not my ending. This is my becoming. As dawn broke pale over the horizon, I closed the journal and exhaled a slow, trembling breath. Tears prickled my eyes, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of release, because I had finally stepped out of the prison of their expectations. I had finally laid down the burden of earning love that was never real. Outside the city woke up humming with possibility, a world waiting to be claimed. And for the first time in my life, I felt ready to take it, because Aurora Blake was no longer just a survivor. She was reborn. Some nights I still hear their voices, echoing in that cold kitchen, whispering through the walls I paid for, calling me burden with the same breath they called me daughter. But now those voices no longer hold dominion over my mind. They are just ghosts trapped in an abandoned house, a house that no longer belongs to them or to me. I have left it behind, brick by brick, memory by memory. I look at my reflection in the apartment window as city lights flicker across the glass. For the first time, I see not a daughter or an investment or a pawn. I see a woman carved from every betrayal she survived. A woman who has learned that silence is not surrender, it is strategy. That kindness without boundaries is not love, it is self-erasure. That forgiveness is not an obligation, it is a choice made only when one's power is absolute. I swirl the wine in my glass, watching the dark liquid catch lamplight like blood. Somewhere below, tires hiss along rain-slick streets, headlights cutting silver paths through the darkness. Life moves on relentlessly, indifferent to old wounds and private victories. And I realize I no longer crave their apology. I no longer ache for their love. Because I have become something they will never understand. A woman who rose from the ashes without asking permission. But as I stand there feeling Margaret's pearls cool against my throat, a single unsettling thought whispers at the edges of my mind. If I could sever my parents so cleanly, what else am I capable of? Because in the darkest corner of my heart, something has awakened. Something that tasted power and found it sweet. Something that remembers every slight, every dismissal, every voice that ever told me no. The world sees Aurora Blake, realtor, survivor success story. But they don't see the storm that lives behind my eyes now. They don't see the calculations running silent beneath every conversation. They don't see the blueprint I'm drawing for a life built entirely on my terms. Not yet, but they will. Because this was only the first chapter, and the burden they discarded. She is about to become a legend. The world thinks revenge is a single act, a knife between ribs, a fortune stolen back, a door slammed in someone's face. But real revenge is slower. It's the silent accumulation of power. It's patience sharpened into a blade. It's watching your enemies decay in the darkness you left them. For months, I moved like a ghost through this new city, quiet, invisible, watching, listening, learning. Every client meeting, every property negotiation, every networking event was another brick in the empire I was quietly building. I learned the language of wealth and power, the hidden codes buried in contracts, the veiled threats behind polite smiles, the hierarchies deciding who rises and who stays crushed underfoot. Every night as I took off my pearl earrings and brushed out my hair, I whispered to my reflection, "They called you a burden. Show them what a burden becomes when it carries its own weight." Soon people spoke my name with caution and respect. Aurora Blake, the woman who closes deals with a single look, the realtor who never loses, the strategist who sees what others miss. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know this empire I was building wasn't just for profit or prestige. It was preparation. Because somewhere beyond polished boardrooms and candlelit dinners, I felt something moving in the shadows. A force older than betrayal, older than rage. A calling vibrating in my bones every time I remembered my grandmother's last words. Never let anyone decide your worth. Aurora, you decide that yourself. And so I did. I decided I was worth an empire. I decided I was worth fear and respect. I decided no one would ever cage me again. My parents' names faded into nothing more than a footnote in my story. Their voices dissolved beneath the rising chorus of my new allies and silent followers. But some nights, standing alone on my balcony, looking down at the flickering veins of city lights, I wonder how far will I take this power, because power is a drug. And now I crave the next high, the next conquest, the next reckoning. They tried to erase me. They tried to steal my home, my dignity, my peace. Instead, they awakened something unstoppable. My name is Aurora Blake, and this is only the beginning. The first move was never about money. Money is a tool. Power is the goal. I chose my target carefully, a decaying strip of commercial properties on the south edge of downtown. Forgotten buildings with boarded-up windows and graffiti bleeding down cracked brick walls like silent screams. The city saw urban decay. I saw opportunity. For nights, I sat parked across the street in my black sedan engine, off watching shadows ripple under flickering streetlights. Drug deals in alleys, homeless men curled under tattered blankets, neon signs buzzing like dying insects. It smelled of urine and desperation, and beneath that the unmistakable scent of neglected potential. By dawn, I had memorized every corner, every doorway, every vulnerability. My lawyer drafted the paperwork under an anonymous holding company. My banker arranged funds quietly without questions. My realtor colleagues never even knew I was the buyer. Within 2 weeks, it was mine. 5 decrepit buildings, 1 forgotten block, purchased for half their assessed value from owners too weary to care. Standing in the cracked asphalt parking lot the day the deal closed, I felt it power humming beneath my skin like electricity. Cold wind whipped my hair across my lips, carrying the scent of rust and oil. The city moved around me, blind to what had just shifted. This was my first piece on the board. A forgotten block today. Tomorrow an empire. I could already see it, rooftop gardens blooming against steel and glass, women's co-working spaces with silent dignity, transitional housing for those fleeing shadows, retail units, art studios, cafes, a kingdom carved from decay. Margaret's voice echoed through me in that wind. Never build something just for yourself, Aurora. Build something that cannot be torn down by greedy hands. I closed my eyes and smiled faintly. Because this empire wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. It was rebirth. It was proof that the burden they discarded had become the architect of futures. This was only my first move. But already the city was beginning to whisper my name, Aurora Blake. And soon they would speak it with reverence or with fear. Either way, they would never forget it again. She called them the Council. 5 women, 5 shadows carved by different pains. None of them knew each other's full story, but all understood one truth. The world only respects what it fears. There was Layla, the disbarred lawyer who had burned her license to keep the secret of a trafficked girl safe. Now she rewrote contracts in invisible ink-binding men who thought themselves untouchable. There was Carmen, once a battered wife, now a silent financial strategist who could make or erase fortunes overnight. Her spreadsheets were her blade, her silence her shield. There was Dr. Harlow, a trauma surgeon forced out for whistleblowing on hospital corruption. She kept her scalpel and her oath, but now used them to stitch together bodies and lives the world deemed unworthy. There was Raina, a hacker whose brother died in prison while wrongfully accused. She no longer sought justice through courts. She simply took secrets and rewrote outcomes with keystrokes and ghosted VPNs. And there was Aurora Blake. She sat at the head of the mahogany table in a dimly lit back room of an unmarked cafe, Margaret's pearls cold against her throat, a steaming cup of bitter black coffee before her. Around them, the city raged with its usual greed and noise, oblivious to the empire coalescing in its veins. "I didn't bring you here to build a charity," Aurora said, her voice calm, lethal. "I brought you here to build a fortress for women like us, for those who come after us." "What's the end game?" Layla asked, eyes sharp behind thin wire-rimmed glasses. Aurora smiled faintly, her fingers curling around her cup. "The end game is that there is no end. We create something that grows beyond us, an empire of refuge, of power, of consequence." Rena tapped her nails lightly on her laptop, eyes flicking to the others. "And the men who stand in our way?" Aurora's gaze turned cold as steel. "They'll be given two options: align or vanish." Silence spread like oil across water. Not fear, resolve, because each woman at that table carried darkness. Each carried betrayal, erasure, violence. Each carried a quiet promise whispered to herself on the worst night of her life. "If I survive this, I will never let it happen to another." Aurora looked at them one by one. The shadows under their eyes, the calluses on their hearts, the fire still burning beneath ruined histories. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel it fully, not vengeance, not pride, but something purer, purpose. "This is only the beginning," she said softly, almost to herself. Outside, dawn broke cold and silent over the city skyline. And somewhere far away, in a crumbling house filled with regrets and echoes, Robert and Martha Blake woke with an unshakable chill rippling down their spines. They didn't know why, but Aurora did. Because the burden they once cast aside had become the architect of an empire, and soon the world would learn to fear her name. Years later, the city whispered her name with equal parts reverence and fear. Aurora Blake. The woman who dismantled empires in silence, who built havens where no woman slept with one eye open, who never forgot the taste of being called burden. She stood on the rooftop of her flagship building as dawn broke, painting the skyline in bruised gold. Below, the streets murmured with early traffic, unaware of the final war ending in her veins. Victor Grayson was gone, ruined, imprisoned, forgotten. Her council thrived, their reach stretching from private banks in Zurich to grassroots shelters in Detroit. And her grandmother's name, Margaret Hayes, became legend, carved in stone outside every sanctuary Aurora built. Yet as the cold wind swept her coat around her ankles, Aurora felt it, the ache of quiet. Power had never been her goal. Revenge was just survival, repurposed into strategy. What she truly wanted was peace. But peace requires forgiveness, and forgiveness was a currency she never learned to spend. Her phone buzzed softly. A single text from Carmen. "He's gone. It's done. Come home." Aurora looked out over the city she had conquered. Tears blurred the jagged skyline, though none fell. The world below moved on as it always does, indifferent to the wars waged above its streets. She slipped her phone into her pocket, feeling the weight of it like a stone. The choice pressed against her chest like a loaded gun. Stay the storm, or lay down the blade. She thought of Margaret's final letter. Power is knowing you can destroy and choosing instead to create. Aurora inhaled the bitter dawn air, filling her lungs with its cold promise. She closed her eyes, and she chose. She turned from the edge, descending the stairs into her building, into the empire she had forged from silence and betrayal, into the future she would now build, not as burden, not as avenger, but as creator. Because power had taught her one last truth: you can burn the world down, or you can light it on fire so others may find their way out of the dark. And Aurora Blake Burden, turned legend, chose the flame. Thank you for walking with me through the dark corridors of this story, for listening to a woman they once called a burden become someone they could never forget. This is not goodbye. This is just the result of this program. Because wherever there are voices that silence us, there will be stories like mine that will wake you up. Stay awake. Stay aware. And when you wake up without apology. I will see you soon in the next review. She turned from the edge, descending the stairs into her building, into the empire she had forged from silence and betrayal, into the future she would now build, not as burden, not as avenger, but as creator. Because power had taught her one last truth: you can burn the world down, or you can light it on fire so others may find their way out of the dark. And Aurora Blake Burden, turned legend, chose the flame. Thank you for walking with me through the dark corridors of this story, for listening to a woman they once called a burden become someone they could never forget. This is not goodbye. This is just the result of this program